On Monday, it's another odd day. Remember, the high school still has day 6 tomorrow when you don't, and so Monday is day 7. So I'll see you on Monday for your Chapter 1 quiz, and make sure you know how to do all these things, plus the absolute value that we studied today. Keep doing your project work in your binder section, but of the project section of your binder, but next week, on the last day of the quarter, it's due to be finished, whether you do it in PowerPoint or in Prezi. Choose whatever software you want to demonstrate, show all the parts of your project, which is the figure it numbers on page 56, project number 4. And I will actually show you how to embed it into a blog post in WordPress on Friday, but it has to be finished so we can do that on Friday. All right, so we started today by setting up the standard window. Remember, the standard window is where x, the range of x is from -10 to +10, and you scale by ones, and the range for y is -10 to +10, and you scale by ones. So we began by graphing this equation, y equals x, and I asked you, why is it called the identity function? And Jabari said it's because x and y are always the same, and that's exactly why. And this is a line, and if you graph this line on square graph paper, you'll see that this line makes a 45-degree angle with each axis, because x and y are the same. So we've got ordered pairs like -3, -3, -2, -2, -1, -1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. And then we investigated, what if we have that same identity function, but then we subtract 4? Or we have that same identity function, but we add 3. And what you found is that when you have y equals x minus 4, it's the same line, but the entire thing is lowered 4 units on the y-axis because we subtracted 4 from x to get y. And when we added 3, the entire y equals x line was raised up 3 units on the y-axis because we added 3. Okay, then we talked about the slope of this line, and the reason why this line makes that 45-degree angle with each axis, because the slope is 1. When you don't have a number with 1, it's the same as y equals 1x. And as Felix said, that means that every time you go up 1 on the graph, to get back to the line, you go over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1, over 1. That's what a slope of 1 means. It's the rise over run from point to point on the line. So then we investigated what happens when the slope gets bigger. 5y equals 2 times x, or y equals 5 times x. And what you found is that the line gets steeper and steeper. And that's because the bigger the slope, the higher I go for my rise for every 1 over of my run. So a slope of 5 means I'm going to multiply what x is by 5 to get y. So every time I go over 1, I go up 5 times as much. Go over 1, up 5 times as much. When you connect those points, you have a steeper line. And then what if we multiply x by a half or by a tenth? Remember, multiplying by a half is the same as taking x and dividing it by 2. Multiplying by a tenth is the same as taking x and dividing it by 10. And so because we're going to be going over 1 and up half as much here, over 1 and up half as much, the line gets flatter. And if every time we go over 1 we go up a tenth as much, and over 1 we go up a tenth as much, that line gets even flatter because these slopes are very small. So when the slope is greater than 1, it's a steeper line than the identity. And when the slope is less than 1, it's a flatter line than the identity function. Then we graphed y equals x squared, and I asked you, why is this called the basic squaring function? And as some of you said, it's because we're squaring x to get y. And that shape has a special name. It's called a parabola. When we graphed y equals x, that shape is just a line, but this shape curves because the slope is constantly changing. And when we graphed y equals 5 times x squared, or y equals 10 times x squared, we're squaring x, but then we're taking that value and multiplying it by 10 to get y. So the amount that we go over by 1, whatever we went up before, is now 10 times as high. So the parabola gets skinnier and skinnier, a very skinny shape. And then if we multiply it by a number less than 1, like a half or a tenth, the parabola gets wider because for every time we go over 1, we're going up less. And then what happens if we take the opposite? If we take the negative of each equation, and you guys found that the opposite of up is down, so the entire identity function is flipped. It's completely flipped. Instead of going uphill, now it's flipped and it goes downhill for y equals the opposite of x. And the same thing with y equals x squared. If we take the opposite of x squared, the entire parabola, instead of opening up, it's flipped upside down. And that's much more like you see the path of a water fountain or the path of a ball when a ball is tossed or the path of a rocket. Those are always upside down parabolas. And then literally we just talked about absolute value today because it's actually a very simple concept. Absolute value means what is the distance from 0 on a number line, and that's simply it. So we use negative numbers to represent the opposite of a positive number. The opposite of a temperature above 0 is below 0. So we use a negative number to represent that. So if I had a temperature of 4 degrees below 0 on my thermometer, the absolute value of that negative 4 means literally how far away is that negative 4 from 0. And distance cannot be negative, so it's 4 degrees away from 0. Whether the temperature is a positive 4 or a negative 4, they're both 4 units from 0 on a thermometer. So absolute value is always positive because it's a distance. Same with elevation. I can have a mountain that's 800 meters above sea level, and I can have a desert that's 200 meters below sea level. But those distances in meters are positive. We just use a negative number to represent that it's down rather than up. Same with sports, gains and losses in business. There's no such thing as a negative euro, but I can use a negative number to represent a loss of euros in a business. But we don't have a bill called a negative euro. So absolute value is not negative. It's always positive. Think of it as a distance. So there's no such thing as a negative meter. Okay, so we can use a negative to mean it's meters below sea level rather than above sea level, but a meter is a meter, whether it's up or down. A meter is a real unit. All right, so then we graphed absolute value functions. So first, you set up your table, filled it in. So the absolute value of negative 3 is positive 3 because it's 3 units from 0 on a number line. And the absolute of a positive number is positive. So notice when we take the absolute value of any number, it's either 0 or positive. We'll never get a negative number here. And then when we graphed it, we got this V shape. And anytime you see a V shape, it is the absolute value. Because all of these negative numbers were flipped over the x-axis because they have to be positive. Because all the y values are positive. It's not a parabola because it's not curving. We're not squaring the number. We're just taking the positive value of x. And then what happened to our graph if we took the absolute value of x and we added 3 to it? So first you predicted, and then we graphed, and we found, oh, it does the same thing as a line or as a parabola. When we add 3, the entire V shape here is raised up on the y-axis 3 units. And then we added 3 and then took the absolute value of it. And what we found is that even though we're adding 3, and you might think it would shift it to the right, when you add 3 and take the absolute value of it, here's our table of values, the entire V is shifted to the left 3 units. And that's because of 0 the hero. And I say 0 the hero because when I'm sitting on the x-axis, like this V is sitting on the x-axis, the value of y right here is 0. So it's this ordered pair that's really important, negative 3, 0. So in order to have y equal to 0, you have to put negative 3 in here, because negative 3 plus 3 is 0. And because I put negative 3 in when y is 0, that ordered pair shifts the entire V left. I asked you to predict what would the equation be if I shifted it to the right 3. And you guys said, well, it would have to be x minus 3 and the absolute value of that because I have to put a positive 3 in here to get 0 for y. So that would be a V shape that's sitting on the x-axis and shifted 3 to the right. So it's kind of the opposite of what you'd think the shift happens, but that's because of 0 the hero. All right, make sure you finish your 3 hours and 15 topics by Sunday night. Today's Thursday. Continue working on your chapter project. It's due a week from tomorrow. And that's this right here. Make sure you save it in Dropbox. And on Friday the 18th, we'll embed it into your blog. And that's it.